All right. Well, I am Alexis Wagoner. I am the Marketing and Education Director for Westar, and I am talking with one of our longtime members, Evelyn Smith. One of the things that I had kind of had in my mind to do was to start talking to people that have been with us for ranges of time, but especially people that have been with Westar for many years, because one of the things that often comes up when you do talk to people and talk to our membership is that they really value the community and finding a place with like-minded people, both on the scholarship side and on the membership side, and how that is valuable for them. And so I kind of wanted to provide a little bit of an extension of that so that we can all get to know each other a little bit better as members and scholars and all that, but also so that we can share some of that with the people that are maybe exposed to Westar, but perhaps not in the direct orbit, so they can kind of see what some of the benefits are and what people really value about the organization. So with all that said, Evelyn, I thought that I would just ask you, what was kind of the journey that led you in the first place to Westar, and when was that, and how did that come about?
Well, I'm 80 years old, so it was when I was in my 40s, I began to be interested in the origins of Christianity. So I started with reading some books on Judaism, knowing that Christianity had come out of Judaism. And then along with that came this question, what would Christianity be like had there not been a Roman Catholic Church? And then about that same time, I read Elaine Pagel's book called The Gnostic Gospels. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, my goodness, I did not realize there were all these other Gospels written at the same time. Only 4, made it into the New Testament, the Christian Bible, we call it now. And I began wondering, well, if our Sunday school teachers and our parents and ministers had not told us about this history, what else were they hiding from us? Yeah. And so I became very curious, and that put me in the mindset to be open to learning more about that period of history. But it was about the same time that we had kind of a rogue Sunday school class at the church we were attending at the time, and the minister was, or not the minister, our teacher was an ex-Jew. He had converted to Christianity, and he was teaching on the intertestamental period of time. Well, he brought a book called The Red Letter Mark to the class and said, there's this group of scholars up in Sonoma trying to decide what Jesus really said and what they didn't say. And I thought, oh, that sounds extremely exciting. But then it was kind of dropped until maybe a year later in the spring. He brought a brochure for a conference that's held every year in Fresno. It's an interfaith conference where they invite different scholars. And they were going to be inviting someone by the name of Marcus Borg. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, okay. But then down at the bottom of the brochure in very small print, it said he was a member of the Jesus Seminar. Well, that caught my eye, and I thought, oh, I've got to go. So I immediately went the next weekend to this seminar, workshop in Fresno. And the whole weekend, I just followed Marcus around like a little puppy dog. Not so much that I had questions to ask him, but I was curious what his answers were to other people's questions. Mm-hmm. And it was just a delightful time. And then toward the end of the weekend, he said, well, we're going to be voting on the virgin birth pretty soon. And I thought, oh, wow, that's going to blow a lot of traditional Christians' minds. And I went up to him and I said, I would love to be a fly on the wall when you discuss that. And that's when he said, well, you can. And that's the first time I knew that these meetings were open to the general public. So, and he said, by the way, our next meeting is next weekend. So he gave me the phone number to call. I was working. I couldn't take the time off. But my dear husband was willing to get up at 4 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and we drove the whole 6 hours up to Sonoma to attend my first meeting in a little Methodist church in Sonoma. And that happened to be their last meeting in Sonoma. After that, they met in Santa Rosa. Mm-hmm. And Marcus was there, and he introduced me, and he pointed out the man over there with the white hair and the bib coveralls, and said, and that's Bob Funk. And by this time, I guess I kind of knew who Bob Funk was. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I was hooked. Mm-hmm. And immediately signed up. I think their next meeting was in Phoenix, so I didn't go to that one. But then the following spring, which would have been a year later, I think, was when Marcus Borg had an all-day seminar on his book. I thought it was Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time, but don't quote me on that. Yeah. And then Don Crossan had another day, all day, talk about his Big Jesus. Yeah. He called it the Mediterranean Peasant. And from then on, I've just gone to all the meetings in Santa Rosa. I did go to the New York big millennial conference where they had all the big guns there. Yeah. Elaine Pagels and Karen King and Marcus and Dom and Spong and Karen Armstrong and everyone. So then well, that's it. I've just been going ever since, and it's where I get my intellectual high. Have made a lot of friends on the staff as well as other associates over the years, and it's not a church, but it certainly is better than anything else I have for the ongoing, except I am a member of the Church of Religious Science, and that's kind of intellectual too. So
yeah, interesting. So I'm curious too, like what in your own journey kind of brought you to the point where you were realizing, like what you said, which is very common amongst what I hear from members, which we call associates, that, you know, I realized that I'm not being told or taught these things by my religious leadership, basically. So were you like in the context where you had grown up in the church? And then if so, like, how did that play into kind of you having the openness to even hear some of this stuff, which, as you said, I think often when in those contexts, when people hear that kind of groundbreaking stuff, they tend to many times shy away from it or just further entrench in their current position. So, you know, kind of what do you attribute to being able to hear it and to be excited about it?
Hear it and be excited instead of being afraid of it.
Right.
I think that here is part of your question. And I had one friend whose husband was involved in this, and she was kind of on the fringes. And after some of the meetings, she said, well, you know, if we go with this historical Jesus, what's left? And it was kind of fearful for her. Fortunately, I did not experience that vacuum. We were just going to the Disciples Church at the time, but they were starting to shift to the far right. And so what they were saying there was not resonating with what I was reading and what I was interested in. And then about the same time, I heard the minister from the religious science speak, and what she was talking about resonated with me. So I had that transition from a traditional Christian into a more spiritual, really. I see that particular, I don't even know if they call themselves a denomination because they're not Christian, but anyway, that organization as being more spiritual. And interestingly enough, they had already jettisoned they had already jettisoned Jesus as God or divine and the Virgin. You know, a lot of the doctrines of traditional Christianity was no longer a part of their philosophy and their teaching. So they were already, in some ways, they were ahead of the seminar, and I could see the seminar moving that direction as the seminar kept whittling away all the traditional doctrines, and the religious science was already there. So I did not experience the vacuum or the fear. I found it as a journey, an exciting journey, and just wanted to know more and more.
That's wonderful. So it sounds like you've kind of gotten a couple different avenues for doing that. And I'm curious what over the last 40 years, which is amazing, what has kind of kept you committed to Westar and to the work? Because the work has obviously changed in some capacity. I mean, in some capacity, the mission is still the same, but, you know, the Jesus seminar is wrapped up, and we've had different seminars over the years that have come and gone. And so as that's happened, what are some of the things that have kept you coming back, as you say, you know, every year in person, and then also just committed in general to the organization?
It's the unfolding story. It's each seminar is opening up another whole area, and it's kind of like reading a big book. And okay, where are they going to go next? And it stretches my mind intellectually. Some of the speakers and some of the scholars and some of the books that they've written really stretches me, and I like that intellectual challenge as well. And I want to share it with other people, and because I've been in a non-Christian institution where there's not been a lot of interest in this sort of thing, it's been a little hard to find someone to share it with, because typically a lot of the associates are Sunday school teachers or retired ministers or whatever. They have a place to go back to, a venue, you might say, I guess, to share the information. Whereas I didn't feel like I had this. I had a few friends that were always interested, but it's not quite the same until now. And now there's a small group of us at the Religious Science, which they call themselves now Centers for Spiritual Living. And so there's a small group that were extremely interested in the books I was sharing in one of the classes they had. And they said, oh, we want to keep this going. So finally,
yeah.
There's an audience to share this.
Right?
Yeah, and a couple of them have come to the meetings with me. So
fun. That's wonderful. Wonderful, Evelyn. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience and taking the time to do that. I really appreciate it, and I think others will benefit and resonate with what you have to say. So thanks so much.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm honored.